On February 16, 1881, the Canadian Pacific Railway began construction. John A. Macdonald was the main push for the railroad, and the goal was simple yet grand. Build a functioning railway from coast to coast, and it could bring people from BC to Ontario in just a matter of days. During the development of the railroad, it led to Canada's first major political scandal, and thousands of Chinese immigrants were subjected to harsh working conditions. In 1872, John A. Macdonald and his party appeared to be losing seats in Ontario and Quebec just before the 1873 federal elections. Macdonald began to ask for campaign donations, and a Canadian entrepreneur and a business magnate named Sir Hugh Allen agreed to donate over $350,000 to Macdonald's campaign. Despite the extra money, the Conservatives lost seats in the election, but Macdonald still won the election. He awarded the contract to build the Transcontinental Railway to Allen's company. On April 2, 1873, Sir John A. Macdonald was accused of accepting election funding in exchange for the contract to build the Canadian Pacific Railway inside the House of Commons. Documents sold to the Liberal opposition members showcase the deal made between Sir Hugh Allen and Sir John A. Macdonald. The letter shows an agreement made between Sir John A. Macdonald and the Minister of Public Works, Hector Louis Langevin. The agreement ensured that John A. Macdonald would get the campaign funding and Allen would get the contract. If you are wondering how this document was obtained, it was a man named George Norris, who was Allen's lawyer's personal private secretary. Norris stole the incriminating letters that Allen had left with Allen's lawyer for safekeeping. After they were accused, Macdonald claimed that his hands were clean because he didn't profit personally off it. However, because Macdonald was a heavy drinker, couldn't remember periods of time between the 1872 election campaign, the negotiations with Allen. After some time passed and the matter was still in the House, Macdonald pushed for a parliamentary committee to investigate allegations of a conflict of interest and corruption. The committee first met sometime in July. A bunch of damaging letters and telegrams had appeared in Liberal newspapers, which was a great place for letters against the Prime Minister. One of the things that popped up was a telegram from Macdonald to Hugh Allen's lawyer, which stated, "I must have another 10,000. Will be the last time of calling. Do not fail me. Answer today." In August, when it had appeared the committee's report would implicate Macdonald, he asked Governor-General Lord Dufferin to prorogue the Parliament. He agreed and prorogued Parliament until October 23, 1873. When that date came, many Conservative members left the party, including Donald Smith, who later became the president of the CPR, and Lord Strathcona, who teamed up with the opposition leader Alexander Mackenzie and called a vote of non-confidence. The Conservatives' popularity descended further after it looked like the new province of Prince Edward Island would vote against them. Macdonald then realized that his government would be highly likely to lose the confidence and seats in the House during the next election. Allen's company never started on the railroad, and a different company got the contract to build the railroad. That had to wait until 1880. At the beginning of November, Lord Dufferin then invited the Liberals to form a temporary government until the election in the following January. The Liberals accepted, and Mackenzie became the new Prime Minister, and an election happened in January 1874. After the election, the Liberal Party formed a new large majority of seats. 138 out of the 206 seats in the House of Commons. After, Macdonald offered to resign as the Conservative leader, but the rest of the Conservatives rejected it, showing the whole of the Conservatives' party still had hope in Macdonald, and later, he became Prime Minister again in 1878. In 1881, after 7 years of delay and several months of debate in the House of Commons, Andrew Onderdonk was hired as a contractor to build a part of the CPR between Port Moody, BC and Savona's Ferry on Kamloops Lake, BC. After starting building the CPR, Mr. Onderdonk became aware of how expensive it was. He was short of money and laborers. He solved his problem by employing about 6,000 Chinese workers for cheaper labor. The difficulty continued trying to get people to work on the railroad because of the hill terrain and the amount of explosions that needed to go off to build tunnels. About 11,000 more Chinese workers were hired. Between 1881 and 1884, 17,000 Chinese came to Canada from China and the United States, where they helped build the Transcontinental Railroad. The exact number of Chinese workers is unknown, but each Chinese worker received $1 a day for working 12 hours a day. Unfortunately, at least 600 workers died from illnesses, cold winters, malnutrition, and explosions caused by building the tunnels through the mountains. These decisions about the Chinese workers were controversial even at the time. Politicians worried about the economic and cultural impact of the Chinese workers. In 1885, after the completion of the railroad, a head tax was created for Chinese immigrants to pay and was to discourage Chinese immigration to Canada. It was originally $50, but then it was increased to $100 in 1900. Then again it was increased to $500 in 1903. The ones that couldn't pay the tax were sent back to China. After 12 years, on November 7, 1885, the construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway was completed. 233 days after completion, on June 28, 1886, the first passenger train took to the rails in Montreal, Quebec, and it arrived in Port Moody, British Columbia, which is close to Vancouver, a week later. With the building of the railroad and immigration, it put British Columbia on the map. British Columbia agreed to join the Confederation mainly because of the railroad in 1871. It also resulted in westernizing Canada,